Welcome to Tech Leader. This is where we bring hard won, real world insights straight from AI leaders who've been there, done that, seen AI progress from its early nascent stages to where it is today. It's a rapidly evolving field, and it's imperative to stay up on top of all enterprise AI trends. And it's best when you hear directly from leaders who've actually gotten their hands dirty, seen AI projects fail. So we're here to hear the success stories, the failure stories, everything in between, and how leaders have successfully built large AI projects from the ground up. We're very fortunate to have with us today Arun Nandi. Arun is one of the top 100 AI leaders. He's a chief data AI and analytics officer, a board advisor to leading brands, a LinkedIn top voice, and an ex Unilever CDIO. Welcome, Arun, and I have been really looking forward to our conversation today.
Thank you, Leon. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks so much, Arun. I really appreciate your time there. And let's begin with quick introduction. If you could tell us more about your day-to-day work and how you see AI progressing as a whole, and taking the center stage.
Sure. So I like to say that I have a very exciting job. We are in the middle, as you alluded to, we're in the middle of this very exciting space within AI. And this AI cycle is, of course, one which is unprecedented in many ways. So I see it as a huge opportunity. And being in this position, I have a great opportunity along with our teams to be able to influence the direction of how we are reshaping how we do business, not just how we run technology, but how we do business as a whole. And this is a massive time of transformation, and very excited to be a part of this journey and be able to contribute to this evolution.
Yeah, I think you kind of put it just the right way. It's not just the technology. It's like thinking about the larger business perspective. And too often we narrow down on a technological lens and miss the bigger picture in terms of the business. Something that we also are kind of keen to explore here at Tech Leader. That's a great insight to kind of have in right in the beginning there, Arun. So to set the stage, when you joined, one of your I'm talking about Unilever, one of your former companies, when you were leading data and analytics there. I'd like to know what was the state of analytics maturity then, when you stepped in, and what specific pain points or opportunities first convinced you that a deeper analytics transformation was needed. What was the red flag that first caught your attention there?
Yeah, great. Thank you for that question. So I had a great vantage point when I joined the data team within Unilever. As a long-time Unilever employee at that point, I had spent a fair amount of time in various business units and functions in developing solutions that drive common problem statements that we have. And I had the great opportunity to be team member number one when we started our data foundation, our data teams many years ago. And one of the things that excited me at that point was just the access and ability to disseminate information and insights. So, insights being the key theme there, which is how can we look at all of the different data that we had? We were huge acquirers of data, we were generators of data, our own first party data as well. And the imperative for me at that point from my days in marketing and in GTM organizations was how can we best harness this data to drive real world customer facing insights that can drive some actions. So that's the impetus that led me there, to really take a leap of faith and say, yes, I want to be part of a team which is new and which is looking at a different remit. And I had the great opportunity to shape this foundation of what we were looking to build, and the ambition of that, which is we're not here to drive a technology change, or we're not here to drive a platform change as an example, but we're here to drive hard business value. And I, as a P&L leader in my previous roles, I always thought about that as P&L value? How do we think through incremental turnover, incremental savings, better productivity, the ability to drive smarter and faster decision making across the enterprise? And if you just look at that, so that was the original intent. And of course, in the first weeks and months, I had the opportunity to influence it use case by use case, setting up those initial foundational business value drivers for us to start building the formation of this evolution. And over time, this evolved into a massive portfolio, which when I left the organization earlier this year, I had a portfolio of about 120 plus digital products and solutions, which were ranging all the way from of sophistication across the spectrum, from traditional BI based efforts to more of the advanced analytics, more of the AI as well that came into the picture. So a great opportunity to be part of this evolution, and a big sort of a 0 to 1 mindset that I was able to drive within that time there.
Yeah, and that's like that's always a critical endeavor, isn't it, Arun? I mean, scaling things from 0 to 1, that's the hardest part. It's easier to kind of hit the ground running when you have things already established, set in stone, kind of, and scaling them. But starting from scratch is always tough, and that too in a field that you've been you've been operational. So that's kind of a major thing. I'm just wondering, you mentioned scaling things up, and were there any specific KPIs that caught your attention there? That kind of were a no-brainer when it comes to applying AI transformation. What specifically caught your attention? Were you noticing lower customer engagement rates, customer churn issues, any specific KPIs that that really needed attention?
Yeah. So within the CPG space, I think of real bread and butter use cases as revenue generation management use cases. So this is related to pricing as one example, assortment and mix as another example, and promotions as a third. So just the ability to drive efficiency through pricing analytics, promotion optimization is a massive, massive impact in that vertical, in both CPG as well as in retail,
Yeah.
where uh, organizations like Unilever and the rest of the peers within that space spend billions of dollars on trade promotions each year. And in many cases, the historical relevance of that was that this was our ability to carpet bomb the entire ecosystem of consumers with a particular promotion. And over time, that evolved into more personalized promotion. So, how do we determine through customer segmentation models the ability for us to determine price sensitivity of a shopper, the ability for us to incentivize a certain shopper or consumer to purchase more, as an example? Each of these we ran as different initiatives. We ran a number of tests in my days as a marketer, A/B tests, etc. When we didn't have as much data available to conduct these insights, so we did most of that through heuristics. But with the advent of a lot more of the analytics work that we started doing, we started to recognize that we could do this in a more structured manner, and in a more scalable manner, where you could take $1 billion of trade promotional spend, and if you were able to drive optimization of 2 to 3%, that was $20 to $30 million in optimization efficiency that you could drive, that can then be reinvested towards either innovation that you want to drive. It can be dropped down to the P&L to make to build a better bank for your gross margin as well. So massive opportunity in just those couple of examples that we were able to unearth.
Yeah, yeah, that's a huge opportunity. Yeah, and talking about your analytics journey, Arun. So let's break it down stage by stage. I'm just curious to know, if you could walk us through each stage. I know you in our earlier conversations you mentioned descriptive analytics and your work in diagnostic, predictive, prescriptive, cognitive, and generative analytics. So for each of these stages, please share with us the most significant business outcomes. Or the improvements that have been achieved, the KPIs, again, a stage wise breakdown for each of those.
Sure, sure. So yes, so I'd say that yes, the evolution of the maturity from the more diagnostic and descriptive end, which I think is still foundational, but moving along that journey has been a great one. So I'd say from that perspective, starting off from that end of the spectrum, the diagnostic and descriptive analytics is still a core part of the effort that most organizations work on,
Yeah,
which is information dissemination and access. So if you think of just the body of work that's involved with that, that is a massive opportunity. So the way I think through it is your ability to better manage your internal operations through the harmonization of different disparate data sets. So in this, a couple of examples of how we brought this to life was um, through sales teams, which traditionally are incentivized to sell, to make a revenue target, so just a sales target, right? And the ability to harmonize their data with internal data sets, which include profitability as one example, external data sets that include variables such as customer loyalty and exclusivity as another example. So just harmonizing those three different data sets gave us an opportunity to think through how can we incentivize our sales teams to think beyond just revenue and into profitability and into customer loyalty so that we are ensuring that the best products are available to the customers that require it at the right point in time. And that was a great example of how we brought the core descriptive and diagnostic analytics and how we were able to reshape that just with the right enablers of data, and through that access to the right information at the right grain, at the right frequency, and at the right accuracies as well. And as we move through that journey, predictive analytics is obviously something that organizations have long wanted and yearned to do. I think a classic example of that is demand forecasting, right? Every organization has uh, numerous demand forecasting processes and models that they run. And over time, over the past 20 plus years, as an industry, we have evolved from linear regression models and time series models to more sophisticated models, which have progressed to multivariate regression and then other methodologies within machine learning as well that has progressed to. And that increase in sophistication has really yielded results in the form of better forecast accuracies. So so our ability as enterprises to forecast better is incredibly important in our ability to manage our inventories, our supply chains, and plan better. So this has yielded, in many cases, working capital improvement of hundreds of millions of dollars. So the ability for us to hold lower inventory at certain parts of the channel ecosystem, whether you are with retailers, dealers, distributors, etc., in a B2B2C context, you have a certain amount of inventory and ultimately you're trying to serve the customers where they are. And so those are great examples of how modeling, forecasting has really contributed to the evolution of this predictive analytics journey. And of course, as we move further along that sophistication curve into cognitive analytics, the ability to discern in natural language, how we are providing insights to questions, let's say, that people have on a regular basis, which has hugely been democratized with large language models today. Um, but I like to quip that we actually had experience in generative AI before Gen AI even came to be, or before the term was coined itself. So lots of work within the natural language space, which has contributed to cognitive analytics, and of course there's great evolution, the great amount of progress in the evolution of LLMs and different foundation models today, which are not just being used for language based tasks, but for a huge number of multimodal use cases that we have, which range all the way from dissecting and helping draft contracts as one example, language based task. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have examples where engineering specs, when you think of thermodynamic engineering or electromagnetic engineering, which is contributing to the manufacturing of products, how those specs can be better designed in future through multimodal models coming in as well. So a lot of progress really from where we started to where we are here, and I think there's a lot more to come as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's an evolving journey, the way you put it, and it's never quite done. We're always on the journey. I'm just wondering, Arun, when you kind of transition from descriptive to diagnostic and now to generative AI, what were the specific early wins that signaled that it was time to now move beyond usual descriptives and diagnostic analytics, and now incorporate Gen AI? With you said the companies that you worked with had already been using generative AI before the term was even coined. And I hear this quite a lot. It's only now that Gen AI has become a buzzword, but companies and brands have been using it for a long time now. So what were the specific early wins that kind of marked the departure, signaled a move to Gen AI specifically?
Yeah. So I'd say the problem statement that we were looking at initially was essentially our ability to drive those action-oriented insights, which are more persona-based and which are more dynamic in nature. And relative to the past, where it is a combination of static views that were designed to think through how we access data. So, dashboards have existed for many, many years in various shapes and forms, right? So, we had let's say, the um, Excel-based dashboards that we kind of used to have in the past. I'm used to, back in the past, having a PDF-based sort of a dashboard that would be sent to you as well,
Yeah,
and then over time evolved into various tools that we use out there today, right? So the Power BIs, the Tableaus, and the like, where you had a set of dashboards, which largely still remain static to a large extent. There is still a need for us to design and develop those static wireframes that we utilize, and for certain kinds of forums and for certain kinds of use cases, user adoption use cases, you do recognize that that's important. But the vast majority of how that data was utilized was really to drive an action coming out of that, which meant that we needed that data to be dynamic. That data needed to be available at various degrees of granularity. That data needed to be always on and available at any point in time, and that data needed to be curated in a manner, filtered in a manner that you can utilize it. So maybe you're not looking for the full pane view, but maybe you're looking for a certain filter, etc., that you want. And that led us to think through the design of a solution which essentially had an ability to curate this for each persona, so that when I log in and see a certain data, that it has some persistent, let's say, filters, some persistent actions based on my previous interactions with that platform. So it learns and knows about me so that it's giving me relevant information. If I'm working for a certain business unit, that it's only curating that data for me and not the entire universe of data. The other is aspects like anomaly detection, so that I'm not searching for that data, but that data is being served up to me, which is through the detection of anomalies, through certain data sets that we see that, hey, there's a certain data point that has increased. Your sales in channel X at dealer distributor Y has increased by X% in the last week, can be an anomaly that can be detected. You don't require the time and the effort to be able to disseminate through that yourself. There are models that can do that with far higher degrees of accuracy than humans can today, and that's another example. A third feature would be alerts, right? So real time alerts for people to get access to it. In the past, the cadence, the way that it would work is somebody would wake up on a Monday morning, come and look at a number of reports, and that would be their job on the Monday. So Monday was entirely for reports that you consumed. We wanted to change that, and we wanted to say, how do we make this an always on model where you get access to that information when it happens, so that you are enabling real-time decision making on those, and that was really another feature that came to life. So through all of these features that we identified could really help serve the needs, we started thinking through how can we move from that more diagnostic and somewhat descriptive level of analytics to more generative and cognitive in nature.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And it clearly marks a shift from, the static sort of rules when you talked about anomalies. So going more dynamic and moving beyond static rules to flag anomalies automatically. Also about the signal source of truth dashboards that you talked about, highly persona based. So if I log on to my dashboard, I see exactly what's relevant to me. So that sort of hyper personalization that Gen AI is enabling is really interesting. So, Arun, during this shift to predictive analytics, and I'm talking specifically about predictive right now, were there any early successes that validated further investment? Any numbers or specific scenarios that you'd like to share with us that validated those predictive investments?
Yeah, so predictive analytics is typically an incremental win journey, which is when you take a forecast, let's say to that example of a demand forecast, and we I have an example where we were looking to build an unconstrained demand forecast, and the existing accuracy was in the 50s, so 55, 56%. So think about that. That's essentially saying that our human-based accuracies that we have within the current ecosystem was just about slightly better than a coin toss, if you think of it. Right. And we wanted to obviously move that to world class, to somewhere in the 90 plus, 98, 99% plus levels of accuracy. And that's something which is a journey that can happen over time. So how do we iterate and how do we build the right model so that that can consume various kinds of signals and where it can drive that incremental accuracy increase over time. And in a couple of instances, what I've had success with doing is having a model run in the background and function as a challenger to the manual process. And in many cases, it took us some weeks and months, even after the model started beating the human accuracies, for us to be able to drive that change. Because I think change management is an often overlooked point in the AI adoption journey.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly imperative for us to think through that change management journey because there are people and processes involved once the model output ends. And even with superior models that are beating human forecast, that doesn't mean that we can, just lift and shift that and change an entire process altogether. So that took us some effort to really develop. And we had some great success with proving out that over time, the model was able to perform more consistently and sustainably better than the human based forecast. And that led to an entire transformation of a function which was tasked with building this forecast on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and I really liked this challenger model that you described, wherein a model effectively competes with human manual efforts. And it's like establishing a clear benchmark because oftentimes when we're talking about AI or generative AI, we're simply talking numbers, but there's no benchmark to compare it against. And with this model that you highlighted, it's like you have a clear comparison wherein human peers achieve a certain task with a certain threshold of accuracy, and you directly have a benchmark to compare against when you deploy AI. So that's a really powerful approach that you talked about. Thank you for sharing that with us, Arun.
Yeah.
uh,
I have an interesting anecdote on that, Devang, that I think people might find helpful, which is that when we started building this, right, one of the unconstrained demand forecast, what I recognized in some of the early days through my product teams is that the statistical models and later AI-based models were great through identifying different drivers and elasticities, but they always got one thing wrong, which is the sales drive that typically happens at the end of a month, at the end of a quarter, or at the end of a year. That's a
correct.
very behavioral based sort of an approach. So the models were not able to identify that there is a human element, which is that the sales teams typically will drive for some kind of an output towards some of these milestones, right? So they may have personal sales incentives, they may have team based incentives that are tied into that. So whenever you had these closures or year closures, you'd have 1 month that is slightly off. And when we dug deeper into it, we recognized that there is a human behavioral element to it. It wasn't really a sort of a demand driver that was changing, but it was the fact that that's a human-based sort of a data point. So over time, the models were able to learn through that as well. That was an interesting anecdote about how data science and behavioral science actually needs to blend together to drive the best outcomes when we think about real-world use cases.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thanks for sharing that with us. That's very interesting, Arun. I mean, as you said, it's about bringing the human in the loop because there are some things that only humans do best. So, bringing in AI to supplement us is kind of what made the project successful, as you highlighted. Um, for prescriptive analytics, Arun, can you describe a project that you've supervised in the past where the recommended actions, for instance, pricing or inventory or marketing, were implemented, and what the measurable impacts were, for prescriptive analytics in particular.
Yeah. So I think a great example is CPQ, so configure, price, and quote use cases, where you are responding to a certain request. This is typically in the manufacturing spaces when you have a product or an SKU that is made to order or built to order based on a customer spec. And in these kinds of cases, you are reviewing the spec that's required. So what's the demand that's there? You're gathering all of those requirements, and then you are responding back with a set of sort of variables that address that demand. I think that's a great example of where you have a model-based recommendation engine that is able to go through obviously all of the levels of detail of the requirements and drive a degree of responsiveness that far surpasses our human ability in many cases. And so essentially think of this as our ability to take the most knowledgeable individual in let's say a team and democratize that across the board to all of the individuals that are in the team, and provide that consistent level of prescription towards every single customer response that you're providing. So every single quote that you're providing, every single bid that you're responding to, etc., has that same level of granularity, all of the deep expertise from the past, etc. And that, in many cases, has helped us to drive the consistency in that quality of offering that we have. And that can address for many human-based challenges such as attrition, such as training needs, such as different requirements of maturity across one team as well, where you're able to replicate the output of some of these human-based actions and democratize that across a wide patch. So those that use case is a great example of how a recommendation engine can really build on all of the historical experience, but can also learn as it goes to make smarter and more efficient decisions over time. So it is only going to recommend in future what it anticipates is going to be accepted. And so that feedback loop becomes incredibly important for us to enable as data practitioners to be able to take that into account for the models to incorporate that, hey, let's say at another place, many million, many millions of data points away, there is another indicator that might support the fact that this is a decision that either can be taken or not, and that influences the output of the recommendation engine in real time.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. And when launching, let's shift the focus to cognitive and generative AI initiatives now. So when you're kind of launching a cognitive or Gen AI initiative, let's say a chat bot or an automated reporting system or even a visual solution, what business processes or outcomes did you see improve instantly, and how did you communicate that value internally to kind of, because we talked about change management earlier, so it's always a difficult thing adapting to new change. So how what's your usual best practices approach like when it comes to communicating those improvements internally?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, um, yes, as we spoke, there is a large focus that I like to pay on the change. Um, and change management is not just about the announcing of us having something available. Many years ago in the past, a product team would come to me and say, we've got a tool ready. This is a go, no go decision. And we would be in a meeting. We would review all the technical specs, all the requirements, and we would say, yes, this meets the requirement. This concludes the user acceptance testing as well. And let's flag it out to go. Over time, my questions were, what is the adoption plan and the plan for change management? And if the product team said we have a newsletter or a email that goes out tomorrow that the tool is live and that's my adoption plan, then my ask to the product team would be, let's go back and review that plan and come back with a more detailed change management plan. Because we don't live in that world anymore where sending an email about a tool being live is sufficient.
Yeah,
We've got to do a lot more in terms of how we drive change management, whether it's um, ensuring and providing the right level of training, the right level of access to make sure that people are proficient in the tools as well. And another accountability of the product teams is to make sure that the user experience is completely unparalleled. We cannot have a user journey which does not take into account the way that the user interacts and engages with the product. And this is where um, chatbots, natural language agents, all of the different cognitive analytics have made it incredibly easy, but also still put the focus back on that customer experience of how we're going to drive it, which is um, we have the ability to respond back to a customer query, but what more do we need to do in addition to what is being asked for is the important question. So if a question is being asked on a particular thread, then the chatbot or the agent should have the ability to think through what's the next question in that user journey.
yeah,
And what is the ultimate aim of the user, and what's the intent of the user, not just the parsing of that particular question and coming back with a spot solution to that spot problem, but what's the more inherent sort of the challenge that is trying to be addressed. And I think the way I think through success and measurement of these is one of the low hanging fruit is productivity, which is how do you do things faster and better over time, and you have a way in which you can quantify faster. The way to quantify better is sometimes more qualitative in nature than quantitative, and it requires certain level of product experience to be able to think through what that is and quantify that. But it's incredibly important to measure and to iterate and to communicate over time the value that this solution is bringing. And recently, I was part of a discussion where we were talking about digital agents. And excuse me, the concept of digital agents being um, or digital workers being one where if you build an agent, would you hire the agent? Is the question, and would you hire the agent for a certain amount of pay? Would be the next question, hypothetical question, right? And if the answer is yes, then yes, that digital worker in future has a role, and as many technology companies have stated, the future is one where it is going to be a combination of human workers as well as digital workers. So really needing to think through the aspect of how we bring that productivity to life through the digital worker ecosystem, through this multi-agentic ecosystem that we are currently in the midst of.
absolutely, absolutely. And as you shifted to more advanced analytics, Arun, this progression from descriptive to diagnostic to predictive, and then eventually to cognitive, and now generative AI. Can you share examples of any non-obvious insights that this yielded and the business impact? And how did you measure that impact? Any specific KPIs you'd like to talk about? So I'm just
Yeah.
curious to know the non-obvious insights that you discovered in the process.
Yeah. So I'd say initial days of generative AI was obviously interspersed with a fair bit of hallucinations, right? And the models were not yet at the degree of sophistications where you could drive a consistency. Over time, that evolved into approaches like RAG, and over time, models themselves came out of the box with certain indicators that would make hallucinations lower. So that was able to drive a degree of consistency. We all know about the kind of the perils of generative AI from a non-standardization perspective, when you can actually interact with a chatbot, let's say, and drive the kind of outcome if you just drive the right prompt, right? One of the examples was about a customer who was able to get a quote from an automobile manufacturer for a car for $1 because they just used the right prompt in the
Yeah,
chatbot on the website, right? So you've got examples like those where you know, generative AI can obviously be used in different ways. So, so as practitioners, we've got to ensure that the right guardrails are in place when we are leveraging generative AI, because it's not going to be the solution for all problems. And when I interact with a business stakeholder, I start with what is the problem statement that we're looking to address, and what kind of solution really meets the need. Not that this is a generative AI solution that has to be developed. There are use cases where generative AI can be extremely helpful, and there are others where there are more traditional means by which that particular problem statement can be solved for as well. So I think it's important to keep that in perspective through this evolution as we move towards the generative space. And I think great examples of how Gen AI have been used in my own projects is the ability to drive social media. Content creation and management through foundation models, both copy as well as image and short form video as well, which is entirely now accessible
yeah,
through the Gen AI foundation models. And the sophistication of the video models out there today is extremely, extremely strong. Even 6 months ago, that level of maturity was different. But today, where we stand, that video generation capability is so lifelike that it rivals a lot of the creative design content that's being created out there. So I think that's a great area which I've had a lot of success with in the past, and where I continue to see a lot of exposure in the future for that to become a massive, massive disruptor to many industries.
absolutely. I totally agree there. And we're talking about a lot of difficult decisions that teams have been making here, Arun. So, can you describe how vendor and ecosystem choices were typically made, considering their financial implications and long-term strategic fit? And I'm talking specifically of Gen AI here.
Yeah. So I'd say that increasingly there is a convergence of various technology stack elements. Um, and there are dependencies across each that are influencing the decision making of both architecture as well as tooling and model choices. So if I think through just the three pillars of compute, data, and models, each of those are influencing the other in certain ways. And obviously, all of the energy and the excitement in the past 24 to 36 months has been about the model evolution and how models have become 100x, 1000x, 10,000x better than what they were. So that has skipped that evolution curve and really gone hyperbolic in some cases. Compute, we've seen over time get more accessible, which is where it's creating a massive demand for compute that I think is going to continue playing out in the ecosystem. And data, of course, is another slow evolution that has happened, slow relatively relative to the others, I would say. But increasingly, architecture choices on the upstream end are being influenced by the downstream as well. So I see it really play out in that manner, which is the ability to bring the entire set of your compute infrastructure, all of your data estate, and all of the models together. And how does that entire all these three variables? How do those harmonize in one ecosystem. And there's multiple ways in which those can be orchestrated. There are best of breed ways in which you can build that, and there are consolidated ways in which you can build that. My approach has been to advocate for a modular and a composable stack, which gives you the best flexibility, gives you the ability to pivot to newer innovations as well as the needs arise, and continue building against this future fit destination state, because it does keep evolving over time.
Yeah, yeah. And but I'm just curious also about the risks and the challenges and any unexpected pitfalls, because this is a very new field and I know it's evolving by the day, if not by the hour. But there are bound to be challenges and risks and pitfalls at every stage. So when migrating analytics to the Gen AI stage, what have been the biggest risks or setbacks that you faced, in the process of transition, and what did you find were the best ways to mitigate them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that risk, and in general, the ability for us to think through responsible um, governing practices and ethical practices as we think through AI is incredibly important. Um, Many of the use cases that we think through, there are ways in which we need to address different forms of bias, different forms of being responsible and sustainable in our usage of these AI tools. I've had a great opportunity to contribute to a paper about responsible and ethical use of AI, um, with Thomas Davenport, written with MIT Sloan. And there we talk about four different principles of how you think through responsible and ethical use of AI. And there are some great examples of putting that to life through the different platforms, through the different technologies, the processes, and the people involved. But at this level of maturity of where we are in the ecosystem, it's incredibly important for us to have the right education model, because we will not have the ability to drive governance and drive risk mitigation through systems and technology alone. It has to be very much human led, and for us to be able to train individuals on some of these is going to be imperative as we drive towards um, democratization of these models, of people using them hands on by themselves. And I would advocate for an establishment, typically in this form of a framework, and allowing for freedom within that framework, so that people can operate independently and drive the agility that they seek, but within the bounds of the governing principles of what you think is relevant to the nature of the enterprise, the nature of the industry, the regulation, the compliance, and the entire ecosystem that's pertaining to that, as well as the responsibility that we have to our customers, our consumers, our communities, as well, in terms of how we are leveraging that data.
Yeah, absolutely. And Arun, is there so in our interactions with tech leaders, we always request them to create an impact map, sort of a framework, a thinking framework with actionable steps, expected strategic outcomes. So, is there a similar plan that you have in mind that you'd like to share? Maybe looking back, any key leadership lessons that have stood out from your interactions with teams expansive on working on expansive projects that you'd like to share with other C-suite executives who aim to orchestrate a similar transformation?
Yeah.
Something where
So
each step is kind of tied to a clear and quantifiable business value.
yeah. So I would advocate for three strategic imperatives, as I call it. These are what I share with my teams when I join a new team, or when I'm coming in into a new initiative. Number one is impact and value, right? So I'm obsessed with value, and we have to be obsessed with the creation of value if we are looking to be AI practitioners who are driving this. We're not here to drive project completions or tool deployments. We are here to drive value for the enterprise, and approaching it from a value first mindset is imperative to drive that. The second is for us to think through this importance of change management that I spoke about earlier, which is this inverted pyramid of investment, which suggests that 10% of your investment should be on the algorithms and the models, 20% on the tooling and technology, and the remaining 70% on change, driving human and process and people change. So that's the second. And the third is this philosophy of scaling fast and failing fast and small is important. So rapid prototyping is incredibly important for us. So the ability for us to take on and deliver against some priorities in a very rapid manner, just based on the pace of evolution that we're in, as you alluded to, I think is incredibly important. So that's something I look to set up in my teams, which is how can we iterate and prototype really rapidly, go from discovery to delivery within a space of days, if not hours? And that's the third key strategic imperative.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's kind of lays down everything in a clear roadmap with, and it's really interesting, and very telling that you allocate 70% to change management. Kind of really establishes the key significance of prepping teams up so they're comfortable moving with this transition, because it's a people's thing after all. Anything you'd like to add on that? And I know we are approaching the
Yeah.
end of our interaction, so and any thoughts around change management that you'd like to kind of add to what you just said and your closing notes?
Yeah, so ultimately, I think AI is something we are all, as practitioners, as business leaders, we're all going to drive AI together. This is a collective effort, and it has to be driven through collaboration between um, public and private enterprise. This has to be driven through collaboration through academia as well, and various other entities that have to come together to progress towards the betterment of what we are looking for as an ecosystem. And I think that's the most important thing that we need to think through, which is AI is not the purview of one team within an enterprise. AI is the purview of every single individual, and we're already exposed to this. So how can we all think through AI as the enabler for our own private and personal lives first, and everyone uses their own favorite LLM and different um, engines today to do their own work. How can you bring that to your enterprise domain? How can you bring that to your startups? How can you think through those through AI, and how can you leverage AI to drive the better outcomes that we're all seeking? I think is the direction which we're on. So that's the path that I would advocate for, which is to continue to think through a forward first mindset, and thinking through AI natively or AI first is a topic that a lot of organizations talk about right now, and that's something that I think is important. Not AI as a bolt-on, but AI as a thoughtful process that is right from the design stage of any application of any problem statement. Thinking through how AI can address that is going to be uh, extremely important for us.
Yeah, I think you kind of summarized it pretty well. It's all about being AI first, and reimagining things from the ground up to uh, not just use AI as a tool, but using AI for everything from strategy to change management, to prepping people up and helping simplify workflows, and starting with productivity, as you initially said, as the low hanging fruit.